March 12, 1979, Rome, Italy. The chill of early spring crept along the cobblestone streets of Rome, carrying with it the faint scent of incense from St. Peter's Basilica. Inside a modest apartment overlooking Piazza Navona, a man sat hunched over a stack of diplomatic papers, rubbing the bridge of his nose. His name was David Cohen, though that was not the name he would use for the world outside these walls. For the Mossad operative, it was a moment that combined exhaustion with purpose. Tonight, he would don the persona that could change the course of a covert mission, a Vatican envoy. Cohen's hands shook slightly, not from fear, but from anticipation. He checked the forged letter of introduction from the Holy See, carefully crafted to withstand scrutiny even from most meticulous embassy clerks. He had spent weeks memorizing the protocols, accents, and subtleties of Vatican officials, each gesture and phrase honed to perfection. Every detail mattered. A single misstep could unravel months of preparation and send him tumbling into a diplomatic disaster. Outside, Rome carried on obliviously. Street lights glimmered on damp pavement, couples walked arm in arm, and the occasional taxi honked somewhere near Campo da Fiore. Inside Cohen's apartment, the quiet was punctuated only by the scratch of pen on paper as he made final adjustments to his notes. He paused to breathe deeply, recalling why he had accepted this mission. Intelligence suggested that a foreign embassy in the heart of Europe, ostensibly secure, guarded by state-of-the-art communication systems, harbored secrets that could tip the delicate balance of power in the Middle East. Syrian military contacts, Soviet advisors, and strategic plans all lay hidden within a suite of offices that no ordinary spy could penetrate. And yet, here he was preparing to slip inside under the guise of spiritual diplomacy. The stakes were both immediate and eternal. One miscalculation could compromise not only the operation but countless lives on both sides of the Mediterranean. Mossad had learned that true intelligence victories were rarely won on battlefields. They were carved from patience, subtlety, and the audacity to trust deception as a weapon. Cohen felt the weight of history pressing down, a tangible presence that made the mission personal as well as strategic. By 8:45 p.m., Cohen was walking briskly through the shadowed streets toward the Vatican's administrative offices. The chill nipped at his ears, but he was focused entirely on the performance ahead. His briefcase, innocuous yet carefully packed with surveillance equipment disguised as liturgical documents, felt unusually heavy in his grip. Each step brought him closer to the embassy, where a network of locks, guards, and bureaucratic routine awaited. He arrived at a nondescript sedan parked near the embassy's side entrance. The driver, another operative working the perimeter, gave him a subtle nod. Cohen adjusted his tie, straightened his clerical-style collar, and allowed himself a final glance in the rear-view mirror, studying his reflection. He was no longer David Cohen. He was an envoy of the Vatican, entrusted with matters of faith, morality, and protocol, yet carrying secrets that could reshape international relations in ways the public would never imagine. Inside the embassy, the ceremonial calm was deceiving. Marble floors gleamed under ornate chandeliers. Portraits of diplomats, long forgotten, lined the walls. Cohen was led into the main reception, where the ambassador, a tall, imposing man with meticulous hair and a thin mustache, greeted him with polite curiosity. Every handshake, every tilt of the head was rehearsed. Cohen answered questions about his purported mission in Rome with precise pauses, quoting papal directives and the nuanced language of ecclesiastical diplomacy. He noticed the subtle scan of security cameras above the grand entrance, the strategic placement of guards, and the patterns in the ambassador's eye movements. Each detail would be critical once the true purpose of his visit unfolded. As the evening deepened, Cohen was shown to the office where the embassy's communications hub operated. The room was unassuming, almost mundane, filled with stacks of classified reports and rows of teleprinters buzzing quietly. He carried a small, innocuous-looking device concealed within his briefcase, a tool that could record, transmit, and relay encrypted signals back to Tel Aviv without raising suspicion. The heart of the operation rested not on firepower or confrontation, but on his ability to maneuver through trust, etiquette, and deception. And then, in that quiet, gilded room, Cohen allowed himself a brief, private thought that the world outside would never know how close it had come to losing control of vital intelligence. One wrong word, one misstep, could have transformed the entire mission into an international scandal. Instead, the knight was poised on the knife's edge, and he had become both priest and predator, observer and intruder, in the service of a state whose enemies never slept. The mission had begun. And in the stillness of the Vatican-draped corridors, history waited. March 13, 1979, Vienna, Austria. The sun had barely risen over the Danube when Cohen, still fully in the persona of a Vatican envoy, arrived at the embassy's rear entrance under the cover of early morning deliveries. Vienna's streets were quiet, mist curling along the riverbanks, and the air carried the faint aroma of freshly baked pastries from nearby cafes. For the Mossad operative, the serenity of the city was a fragile mask over the tension that simmered beneath every step. Inside the embassy, Cohen moved with practiced ease. Guards were courteous but thorough, their eyes trained on anyone approaching sensitive areas. He presented his credentials once again, flawless in appearance and tone, and the personnel barely glanced beyond the official Vatican seal. To the untrained eye, he was nothing more than a man on a solemn, spiritual mission. But every movement, every glance, was part of a meticulously orchestrated operation. The target of Mossad's interest lay behind a door marked Communications and Liaison, a room containing diplomatic dispatches, encoded messages, and intelligence reports that could reshape Middle Eastern geopolitics. Cohen's task was not to steal the documents outright, not yet. His objective was far more precise, to plant a surveillance device capable of transmitting classified communications directly to Israeli intelligence, a silent witness, in a foreign capital. The technology was cutting edge for its time, a tiny bug hidden inside what appeared to be a standard Vatican liturgical book. Cohen approached the desk where the ambassador had been working the previous evening. The man was gone, replaced by a junior aide busy sorting correspondence. Cohen's heart pounded, but his expression remained serene. He laid the innocuous book on the desk, adjusting it to appear as if he were preparing notes for an upcoming meeting with the papal secretariat. With the aide's back turned, he discreetly activated the concealed bug, its minuscule microphone perfectly aligned to capture all ambient sounds. Every second stretched into an eternity. The danger was not in brute force, but in subtlety. One misaligned gesture, one accidental knock, could alert the staff. Cohen's training in behavioral observation became crucial. He noticed the aide's shifting weight, the twitch of a shoulder as a guard walked past the corridor outside, the faint hum of security cameras above. Each sensory input was catalogued, analyzed, and used to calibrate his movements. By mid-morning, the device was in place. Cohen allowed himself a brief, internal exhale, but his composure did not waver. The mission was far from complete. Mossad operatives in Vienna were waiting for confirmation, prepared to act the instant the bug transmitted the first syllable of intelligence. Cohen's role was delicate. He was both participant and observer, ensuring the success of a mission that could never reveal itself to the casual eye. He lingered in the room a few moments longer, adjusting the book's position to maximize the device's reception, all under the guise of reviewing documents. His mind raced, calculating potential contingencies. What if a diplomat entered unexpectedly? What if security procedures changed mid-operation? Every scenario had been drilled countless times, but the real world never followed rehearsed patterns. By late afternoon, Cohen's work was complete. The bug was operational, and he exited the embassy with the same composed demeanor he had entered with, bowing slightly to the guards and staff, exchanging pleasantries that masked the extraordinary stakes behind them. Outside, the streets of Vienna were beginning to fill with pedestrians, oblivious to the silent operation that had just unfolded in the shadows of their city. Back in a safe house on the outskirts of the city, Cohen contacted his Mossad handlers through a secure line. A single word confirmed the operation's initial success. The bug was transmitting. Intelligence that had once been locked behind layers of diplomatic protocol and guarded corridors was now accessible to Israeli planners. For Cohen, the moment was both triumphant and terrifying. Triumphant because of the success, terrifying because he knew the consequences of exposure could extend far beyond his own life. As night fell, Cohen allowed himself a rare moment of reflection. The streets of Vienna glowed under the soft light of gas lamps, and the Danube shimmered in silver hues. Somewhere inside the embassy, conversations intended to remain private were now crossing invisible lines, entering ears that could interpret them for strategic advantage. Cohen understood the moral ambiguity of his work, the ethical tightrope walked by operatives who wielded deception as both shield and weapon. History was being shaped in silence, in a room full of paper and light, with one man playing the part of a messenger from a faith he had never served. In the quiet of that evening, he realized that the true cost of intelligence was not always counted in casualties or battles. It was measured in trust, secrecy, and the invisible, unspoken consequences of being both the observer and the intruder. The operation had entered its next, even more delicate phase. The bug would gather information for weeks, feeding strategic insights back to Tel Aviv. But Cohen knew that the human element, the unpredictability of diplomats, staff, and political shifts, would always remain the most dangerous variable. One misstep, one accidental glance, one suspicion, and the mission could collapse entirely. For now, however, the night belonged to him and to Mossad. And the world outside, bathed in the quiet glow of Vienna's lamps, remained blissfully unaware of the invisible thread of espionage that had been woven into its corridors. March 27, 1979, Vienna, Austria. The city was waking slowly, but inside the embassy, the machinery of diplomacy churned with precise, unrelenting rhythm. Cohen returned under the guise of a Vatican envoy, this time with a subtle shift in his mission, to ensure the surveillance device he had planted was functioning optimally. Weeks of careful planning had led to this moment, and the tension was palpable. Every handshake, every glance from embassy staff was a potential threat, a subtle test that could expose months of meticulous preparation. He walked the familiar corridors with deliberate calm, observing the placement of guards and cameras, memorizing their routines as if reading a living map. The bug he had planted was discreet, hidden within a gilded missile, yet it had already begun transmitting valuable intelligence to Mossad in Tel Aviv. Cohen's focus was absolute. Any distraction could undo the operation. A sudden cough, a misplaced document, a passing diplomat could betray the presence of the device, and the stakes were global. Cohen entered the communications room once more, his practiced demeanor masking the adrenaline that coursed beneath. Papers were neatly stacked, teleprinters hummed in their rhythmic cadence, and the faint scent of old wood and ink filled the air. Carefully, he checked the device's alignment under the guise of reviewing Vatican correspondence, adjusting its placement to ensure maximum acoustic clarity. Every move was casual, natural, yet precise, honed through months of Mossad training in deception and surveillance. The challenge of espionage was not brute force, but psychology. Cohen needed to blend into a world of diplomats, priests, and clerical aides, all trained to notice anomalies. He observed a junior aide, distracted by routine paperwork, and allowed himself a fleeting, private exhale. It was small victories like this that ensured the operation remained invisible. By mid-afternoon, Cohen moved to the embassy's private library, ostensibly to review historical documents relating to Vatican diplomacy. In reality, he was mapping the embassy's internal network, noting which offices contained encrypted communications, which corridors were monitored, and how embassy staff moved between rooms. Each observation was meticulously catalogued, providing Mossad with a blueprint of vulnerabilities they could exploit in future operations. The risk was constant. One careless gesture, a stray question from an aide, or a delayed response could trigger suspicion. Cohen had been trained to respond without hesitation, to deflect attention, and to maintain the illusion of authenticity. The skill was not merely in the action but in the inaction, the ability to appear oblivious while recording, analyzing, and memorizing. Evening fell, casting long shadows through the embassy windows. Cohen lingered in the library, letting the hum of activity mask his movements as he conducted final checks on the bug's operation. The device was transmitting perfectly, capturing conversations, strategic planning, and coded exchanges without the slightest hint of detection. Mossad operatives in Tel Aviv monitored the feed, transcribing, analyzing, and preparing actionable intelligence that would soon influence decisions at the highest levels of government. But the operation carried a human cost that was invisible to those who would ultimately benefit from it. Cohen often reflected on the moral paradox he embodied, a man posing as a servant of faith while serving as an instrument of deception, capable of shaping destinies from behind a veil of trust. The burden of knowledge weighed heavily, a quiet reminder that espionage was as much about patience, restraint, and careful observation as it was about daring acts of audacity. As he exited the embassy under the fading light of late March, Cohen allowed a brief glance over his shoulder. The marble corridors were emptying, the staff retreating to the warmth of their homes. Outside, the streets of Vienna glimmered under the soft illumination of gas lamps, unaware of the silent intrusion that had occurred within their walls. The city carried on as it always had, blissfully unaware of the invisible threads of espionage woven into its fabric. Returning to the safe house, Cohen reviewed the latest transmissions from the bug. The intelligence was more detailed than anticipated, providing insight not only into diplomatic negotiations but also into the intricate relationships between the embassy, foreign powers, and Soviet operatives. Every word captured, every strategic nuance, strengthened Israel's position in a world where information equaled power, and where knowledge obtained quietly could prevent wars, influence negotiations, and save lives. And yet, for all the operational success, Cohen remained acutely aware of the fragility of his mission. The embassy staff were not careless. They were highly trained, diligent, and observant. One misstep, one overlooked detail, could unravel months of preparation and expose him to consequences that extended far beyond his own safety. Every day was a balance between audacity and caution, every step measured against the ever-present risk of discovery. The night concluded with Cohen in a windowed room of the safe house, gazing at Vienna's quiet skyline. The city, with its historic grandeur and delicate charm, had no knowledge of the invisible hand shaping events within its diplomatic enclaves. Cohen understood the paradox of espionage. It was at once profoundly personal and relentlessly impersonal. The world would never know the names of those who operated in silence, but the consequences of their actions would ripple across continents. He prepared for another day, knowing that each subsequent visit would bring new challenges, that trust was both a weapon and a vulnerability, and that the line between faith and deception had been blurred in the service of a mission whose stakes were nothing less than global security. April 10, 1979, Vienna, Austria. The morning light filtered through the tall windows of Cohen's safe house, painting streaks across the worn parquet floor. He sat quietly, reviewing the transcripts of conversations captured by the bug in the embassy, cross-referencing names, patterns of communication, and subtle references to military movements and diplomatic negotiations. Every nuance mattered. Each whispered phrase or casual remark could reveal intentions hidden from the world outside. Cohen's mission had entered its most delicate phase. The initial success of planting the bug had provided a steady stream of intelligence, but now the challenge was interpretation. Diplomats spoke in layers, masking sensitive information within innocuous exchanges. Detecting what mattered and what was distraction required not only skill but instinct honed by years of Mossad training. He remembered the meticulous preparation that had led to this moment, the weeks of studying Vatican protocol, the hours of rehearsing gestures, the careful calibration of speech and tone. Cohen had become the living embodiment of a persona so convincing that even the embassy staff treated him with respect and, unknowingly, with trust. Trust, the most dangerous variable in espionage, was the linchpin of this operation. That afternoon, he returned to the embassy under the pretense of delivering supplementary documents for Vatican review. The security staff greeted him politely, none the wiser to the small envelope concealed within his coat pocket. Inside was a discreet maintenance tool for the bug, allowing Mossad operatives to recalibrate it without raising suspicion. Precision was critical. A malfunction could compromise months of intelligence collection, and exposure was unacceptable. Inside the communications room, Cohen moved with purpose, but without haste. The bug, nestled innocuously among sacred texts, hummed faintly, undetectable to the untrained ear. He adjusted its orientation slightly, ensuring optimal reception, while simultaneously noting changes in staff routines. The ambassador remained absent, attending a conference with foreign dignitaries, leaving Cohen with the room, and the secrets it contained, temporarily unmonitored. As he worked, Cohen overheard fragments of a conversation between two aides discussing the embassy's interactions with Soviet operatives. Each phrase, carefully masked in bureaucratic language, revealed strategies for arms procurement, logistical planning, and coordination that could influence the balance of power in the Middle East. For Mossad, these were not just documents or messages. They were lifelines, pieces of a complex puzzle that demanded both attention and discretion. Later, during a brief interlude in the library, Cohen allowed himself a rare reflection. The moral weight of his actions pressed heavily on him. He was trusted by people who had no reason to doubt him, relied upon to deliver insights for faith-based diplomacy, yet his true purpose was the opposite, subverting that trust for strategic advantage. The duality of his existence, priestly envoy by appearance, intelligence operative by purpose, was a tension he carried silently, a private burden that history would rarely acknowledge. Evening arrived with Vienna bathed in the soft glow of streetlights. Cohen returned to the safe house to review the day's transmissions. Analysts in Tel Aviv were already piecing together actionable intelligence from recordings, mapping relationships, tracking the flow of information, and evaluating vulnerabilities. Each successful capture of knowledge brought strategic clarity, yet Cohen remained acutely aware of the fragility of it all. One unexpected visitor, one altered routine, one skeptical guard could unravel the entire operation. That night, a new challenge presented itself. Embassy staff had scheduled an internal security audit, a seemingly routine procedure, but one with the potential to expose the bug if not managed carefully. Cohen meticulously planned his next visit, devising contingencies that balanced access, observation, and the maintenance of his cover. Every step required precision. Improvisation could be fatal. He also began to notice subtle changes in his own psyche. Living within a persona that demanded deception, operating in the shadows, and constantly navigating the line between trust and betrayal, Cohen felt the slow erosion of the boundaries between his true self and his assumed identity. Mossad operatives often face this psychological cost, the invisible scars left by intimate betrayals of trust. Cohen knew that each day spent inside the embassy, interacting with people unaware of the danger, deepened this tension. Still, the mission pressed on. The intelligence flowing through the bug was invaluable, providing unprecedented insight into foreign diplomatic strategies, military planning, and covert communications. For Israel, this information represented both a shield and a sword, a means to anticipate threats, shape diplomatic decisions, and secure strategic advantage in a volatile region. Cohen prepared for the night's return to the embassy, aware that every visit, every adjustment, and every observed interaction was another thread in a tapestry of espionage that demanded unwavering focus. He was both predator and observer, participant and witness, balancing on the knife's edge where history, secrecy, and human consequence intersected. In the quiet of the safe house, the streets of Vienna below continued their ordinary rhythms, cafes closing, lamps flickering, the river flowing unperturbed. Outside, life went on as if the invisible web of espionage did not exist. Yet inside, Cohen knew that the night's work, invisible to all but a select few, had the potential to shift the delicate balance of global power in ways that would never be acknowledged publicly. April 18, 1979, Vienna, Austria. The early morning fog hung low over the city as Cohen prepared for what would be his final visit to the embassy for this operation. Months of careful surveillance, deception, and precision had culminated in a delicate balance. One misstep now could undo everything. The streets of Vienna, bathed in pale sunlight, seemed deceptively calm, masking the invisible tension that pulsed within the walls of the diplomatic mission. Cohen moved with measured steps through the familiar corridors, a man entirely at ease in a world that would have been perilous to anyone else. Today, his task was subtle yet critical, to retrieve the first physical evidence that would verify the bug's intelligence. Analysts in Tel Aviv needed confirmation that the data streams corresponded exactly to the documents and communications Cohen had monitored, ensuring actionable intelligence could be deployed with confidence. Inside the communications room, everything was unchanged, meticulously maintained. Cohen approached the gilded missile, carefully lifting it as if to review its pages for religious content. Beneath its cover, the miniature recording device had performed flawlessly, capturing weeks of high-level discussions, confidential strategies, and sensitive diplomatic exchanges. He examined the bug discreetly, noting its operational integrity, and making minor adjustments to extend its lifespan just long enough for Mossad to confirm and act upon the intelligence it had gathered. As he worked, Cohen reflected on the human dimension of espionage. Diplomacy was built on trust, appearances, and unspoken rules, and he had moved within that delicate ecosystem, exploiting it without ever being detected. He thought of the aides, the clerks, the ambassadors, all of them unaware that an invisible presence had quietly listened, recorded, and transmitted their words across continents. The ethical weight of the operation lingered, a silent companion to the strategic victories it had achieved. By midday, Cohen completed his task and prepared to exit. The embassy's corridors, filled with ordinary routines, belied the extraordinary events that had occurred. Every handshake, every nod, every exchanged document had been a carefully choreographed component of a mission that blurred the lines between service and subterfuge. Outside, the streets of Vienna were alive with commerce and life. Cohen walked calmly to the safe house, merging with the rhythm of the city, his presence unremarkable and invisible. The data he carried, already transmitted to Tel Aviv, represented a treasure trove of intelligence, insights into foreign diplomatic maneuvers, exposure of vulnerabilities, and confirmation of the reach and influence of Soviet and Allied operatives across Europe. For Israel, this information was priceless, a window into strategies that could impact national security and regional stability for years to come. That evening, Cohen returned to Tel Aviv, debriefed extensively, and provided precise accounts of the operation's successes and near misses. Analysts and Mossad directors confirmed that the intelligence gathered had exceeded expectations. The bug had captured communications that illuminated plans, capabilities, and intentions previously hidden from Western eyes. Decisions regarding military readiness, diplomatic engagement, and security postures were now informed by concrete, actionable insights obtained through audacity, precision, and trust turned into a strategic weapon. The aftermath of the operation left a lasting impression on Cohen. He had walked a path few could understand, a life lived in the shadows of both morality and necessity. He understood the paradox that intelligence often demanded, profound acts of deception in the pursuit of protection, and the quiet knowledge that lives had been safeguarded, not through confrontation, but through subtlety and patience. Over time, the operation, later classified for decades, became a benchmark for Mossad's use of human ingenuity, discipline, and audacity. The lessons of Vienna echoed in training rooms, briefings, and mission planning, that the most improbable personas, a Vatican envoy, a clerical official, could carry out feats of extraordinary espionage when executed with precision, discipline, and unwavering composure. As history would record, the world outside Vienna remained unaware of the invisible hands that had shaped events within the embassy. Cohen's identity, forever entwined with that of the envoy he had portrayed, was preserved in secrecy. The mission had succeeded not through force or violence, but through subtlety, psychological insight, and the quiet mastery of trust. And in that quiet, behind the veil of diplomacy, espionage, and shadows, Mossad had reminded the world that intelligence was not always loud, not always visible. It often operated in silence, in the spaces between appearances, and in the invisible threads of human trust turned into strategy. Vienna returned to its ordinary rhythm, the streets echoing with footsteps, voices, and life, entirely unaware of the invisible history that had unfolded in its midst. Cohen, now free of the immediate pressures of the mission, understood that the true power of espionage lay in what remained unseen, in the knowledge wielded without notice, and in the delicate balance between moral complexity and national necessity. The mission was complete. The world, none the wiser, continued onward.